Well, hello everyone, and I should say good evening from Zurich. It's about 11 p.m. here, 5 p.m. on the East Coast, 4 p.m. Central Time, and let's see, 1 p.m. just about lunchtime out for those of us joining us from the West Coast. I'm here with my lovely toy poodle, Elsa, who I introduced to you all last time. And we are here with a very, very special guest. This is our second broadcast of Weekly Hope, which is designed to share your thoughts and your voices on a variety of topics across the mental health and eating disorder spectrum, and also interview thought leaders, clinicians, experts, influencers, people really making a difference in the field of eating disorders, get their take and ask difficult questions so we can really dive into the meaty subjects that are trending, I guess you should say, or could say, in the eating disorder field, and those that are really on your hearts and minds. So welcome. We've already got a lot of you signing on, so I just want to say thank you so much. Your dog is so cute. Thanks, Leah. Yeah. She's awesome. So first, before we dive into our topic, I want to introduce our guest. I'm welcoming Travis Stewart, who is joining us from St. Louis, Missouri. Travis is the Director of Business Development and Marketing at McCallum Place and is a great friend. And we had, like I mentioned before, Travis and I talk about, we had our wardrobe department for Weekly Hope come on and make sure that we were both wearing our glasses and our pink for this episode. Yeah. But welcome, Travis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. It's fun. It's fun to be talking with you. I love our conversations. Are always thought provoking, and so it's fun to catch up with you all the way across the ocean. So
absolutely. So we'll want to dive right in because we have a lot of content here and want to make sure that we get to so much of it. As you and I were going back and forth, because you have done so much speaking and so much great work in the clinical field on a range of different topics. But when I asked you, what's something that's kind of controversial or there's still lots of questions about or people might be wondering about, we came up with this topic of self-love. And it's interesting because I think that it seems so intuitive that developing a sense of self-worth, of self-esteem, of self-love throughout the recovery process is essential, basically, that it's a good thing, that's something that we should strive for. And yet definition of terms is so important. And we came up with the question to ask, what do we mean by self-love? Eating disorders and self-hatred, is self-love really the answer? And that's what I wanted to talk with you about and ask that question, get some definition of terms, and also talk to you about some of your ideas of how to change the language moving forward to something that's more helpful and maybe less destructive, because there can be unintended consequences, of course, of some of these things and some of these activities. So to just dive right in, let's talk about some of the problems with the language of self-love. Self-love, self-esteem, this movement kind of started in the 1970s, 1980s. There's a whole history behind that of how we got here. But talk about some of the problems with the language. Like, what does love really mean? I mean, in the English language, love seems to mean 1,000 things. What does love really mean? And why is there a problem with that word when it comes to self?
Yeah, let me give a couple disclaimers first as we dive in. One, people might be going, he's the director of marketing. Like, what does he have to know? So my background is clinical. I began working in the field in 2003. So I've worked with a lot of clients and so given a lot of thought to this. The other thing I want to say is I'm not a researcher. I'm an idea person. So I'll read different things outside of eating disorders, and I'll, in my mind, they start to relate. And so I love ideas, and I love the world of ideas, and then how to make those things practical. So what I hope today is that we're promoting ideas and thinking. And then I hope that maybe some master's student who's thinking about a PhD will take this topic and run with it and study it and research it, because I'd love to see outcomes related to this. So that's kind of my hope for this conversation, is that we're starting a conversation within the field that I think is important because it doesn't get talked about. So for me, this topic kind of pushes a button in me, because I'll see, whether it's on social media or you go to an, Anita walk and you hear a speaker or something, and there's a lot of language around we need to help people love themselves. If they love themselves or they love their bodies, then we won't have eating disorders. And I cringe a little bit inside when I hear those, not because it's entirely wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I just don't think it's sufficient to really address the issues. And I know clinicians who would agree with me, therapists who work in the field, who say it just feels oversimplified, and that it's not really getting to the issues. And so I think the discussion around language of what we mean by the word love, self-love, is really important, and one that I've never heard anybody else talk about outside of private conversations. So when I was thinking about this topic, I thought, well, why is it that it bothers me sometimes? And so I came up with 3 or 4 things that we'll talk about of what I think are problems with the language of self-love. Again, I'm not promoting self-hatred by any means. And
no, none of us are here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to see people growing in a sense of self-worth and dignity. But so the phrase self-love is challenging, I think. One of the reasons that the phrase self-love or learn to love yourself is challenging is that love is a relational word. Love, in almost every context throughout history of mankind, love is always meant about relationship, whether that's the love of friends, sacrificial love, or romantic love. It's usually the reference of 2 people or a group of people relating to one another in a way that is unselfish and is looking out for the best interest of others. I think that's one of the best definitions of love is I'm looking out for the interest of others, right? I'm going to do what is in the best interest of my kids or my wife or my friends. That would be loving. There's lots more definitions of love, but I think it's whenever you take a relational word and you make it an internal word, I think it gets confusing, right? Yeah. What does it mean to love myself? I'm not sure. That is a challenging thing. And it also gets into our faith. It gets into like our areas of spirituality. It gets into our culture. How do we define, narcissism versus self-love? Because in the past, that would have meant the same thing, right? Right. All those kinds of things are really confusing when you get to that language of self-love. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just don't think it's the best word.
And talk a little bit about too, because I hear this and I have heard this from so many people that I've talked to out on the road, when I hear their stories, that some people are really on fire in recovery and get to a place, and I remember being in this place after a couple of years and being like, yeah, I'm really proud of myself. I'm so excited and thankful and proud of where I am in recovery and like super on fire. You can get to that place. But then there are other people that can be in a relatively healthy place and really moving forward in recovery, and yet still waking up every morning and being like, I just don't know if I can love my body every day, that it feels somewhat unattainable. And that they have to get to this high of radical love for their body. And again, what does that even really mean in order to be fully recovered, when grace, acceptance, compassion are probably more adequate words, and it doesn't feel so unattainable? Is that an issue with this as well?
Yeah, I think I've seen clients like that who, particularly the clients who struggle with the most severe self-hatred and self-contempt and self-harm. If you sit down and were to encourage them or cheer them on to self-love, it just would go one ear out the other, because it feels so impossible. And so, yeah, and there may be, and it can be so passing too. There may be days I'm grateful for my body and days where I'm like, golly, I'm getting old and I don't like my body, or whatever. It can be so subjective. I think that's another thing about the word love, is it's a very subjective word. It's hard to define. And so what does that mean to feel like I love my body today? I think that's really challenging.
Yeah. And I just want to let you guys know. So some of you've got some really, really great questions. Leah, Kathy, Sarah, thank you so, so much. So I just want to ask you to stay on, because they're super great. And they have to do with how we want to change the language and learn how to self-love or love our bodies, accept and treat ourselves with dignity after these next couple questions. So I want you to stand so we can answer those questions, because Travis is going to speak directly to what you're talking about. So thank you so much for tuning in with those
Great
questions. So, all right. So self-love is really dealing with a symptom of, like you say, a deeper problem. And that is shame. Brené Brown is one of my all-time favorite authors, leading researchers, and she has some fabulous TED Talks, as probably many of you know. But she deals a lot with this concept, and talk a little bit about self-love's relationship with shame.
Yeah, that's I think one of the most powerful reasons for me to address this issue is how related the concept of self-hatred and shame are. So if we start to think about, why do we need to love ourselves, right? What is the impetus behind the movement in the eating disorder world for self-love? I think it's because we see in the eating disorder world so much self-hatred, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense. We see a lot of self-hatred. We want to encourage self-love. I think the challenge with that is that self-hatred, in my understanding, is primarily a symptom of a deeper problem. Self-hatred, in my understanding, is primarily a symptom of shame. Okay, and so let me explain a little bit about how I understand that works. My thinking on this was initially impacted by Dan Allender, a psychologist who's did a lot of study on abuse and shame, and so what I'm going to share comes a lot from him. But shame is a relational dynamic, right? Shame is, you can feel shame about yourself, but it's almost always an experience of, if other people knew this about me, you know,
yes,
they would be disgusted, right? If people really saw me as I am, right? So shame is the experience of feeling exposed. I've been exposed, and either I'm disgusted with myself, or others would be disgusted with me, right? So it's primarily it's a relational experience. Dan Allender says it's an experience of the eyes. When we feel shame, the eyes drop, the head drops, the shoulders slump. There's the inward desire to hide, right? To cover up. So shame is exposure and the fear of rejection or disgust. So then we feel naked. So what do we do if we feel exposed? Well, we've got to try to distract people, like look away, right? Or clothe ourselves somehow. So I'm going to give you 4 examples of how self-hatred works with, or hatred works with that, not just self-hatred. So number 1, it's an attempt to divert the eyes of somebody else. So let's say I forgot to do this webinar, and you're like texting me and like, Travis, where are you? We're on in 5 minutes and all that. And then like at 30 minutes from now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot. I would feel exposed, right? I would fear your rejection of me and all of the people who signed on to Facebook thinking that they were going to hear a webinar. So one of the ways I could divert that shame would be to go, I'm so stupid. I am such an idiot, in hopes that you would then not judge me, right? If I'm so hard on myself, then you might not be so hard on me, right?
That is so good. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Another way it sort of happens is like, I'm so stupid feels powerful, right? Anger feels more powerful than nakedness. So the way Allender kind of describes it is that I clothe my nakedness with my own anger. All right. So my self-hatred is an attempt to distract you and cover up with something that feels better, right? So that's 2 things. I'm going to divert your eyes. I'm going to cover myself up with anger. And then I'm also trying to protect myself from future exposure. If I'm hard enough on myself, if I hate myself enough, if I beat myself up enough, maybe I won't do it again. Maybe I won't forget next time, right? So I'm trying to protect myself from future shame and exposure. And maybe I'm trying to protect you. Maybe I'm trying to beat myself up enough so that I don't hurt you, right? I don't repeat the trauma of shame. So if, we have shame on a daily basis, right? We make mistakes and things like that. So there's sort of ordinary shame, and then there's shame that comes from, trauma, abuse, those types of things. So I think self-hatred is most often a reaction to shame.
Yeah. Travis, could I just interrupt you for a second? Could it also be that the self-hatred or condemnation or punishment comes from a place of I'm so afraid of criticism or not pleasing other people that
Yeah.
maybe if I publicly beat myself up enough, others will be so afraid
Yeah.
that I'm weak, vulnerable, fragile, etc., that they won't dare criticize me or they won't dare hold me accountable
Yeah.
or for whatever it is. I mean, we're not talking about eating disorder behaviors here. It could be anything. That they'll walk around on eggshells around me so much because I don't know what would happen to me if there was any kind of criticism. So I'm going to make sure I pound myself hard enough to make sure no one else does, because I don't know what I would do.
So you're saying it's sort of out of a
A
fragile ego.
self-protective. Yeah.
But I would argue that's probably still related to shame somehow.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. So I think, so if self-hatred is about shame, I'm not sure self-love is necessarily the best answer, because shame is primarily a relational dynamic.
Mm.
And I think Brene Brown, as you quoted, I think she would agree that there's a way to heal shame, and that we're sort of getting into our next points of where do we go from here. But the antidote to shame is vulnerability, right? Which is another relational dynamic. So if you have a relational wound, I think you need to have a relational solution.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
So maybe we can come back to that. But that's why I think that self-love keeps you isolated, right? It keeps the solution with you, right? Another problem I have with self-love is if self becomes, this could be controversial.
Yeah, go for it.
if self becomes the ultimate authority or the only authority of my value, then why can't I decide that I don't deserve it?
Mm. Yeah.
I think we've got to pull on the resources of our community.
Yeah.
Who say that I have value and dignity.
Yeah. No,
So it
it's
just gets into the circle of self-isolation, and I think self-love has the danger of isolating people. I don't think that's the intent. I think it has the danger of eating disorders are about how can I use my own resources to survive, right?
Yeah.
Understandable. I don't want to just say so the recovery is about figuring out a new resource to survive. I think it's more than that.
Yeah, that's so good. Before we dive into the last little bit here about how do we change the language into something that's a little more helpful, I just want to say Sarah Rutherford she said, oh my gosh, that's so true. People don't know what to say, and it's so much easier to hide in the eating disorder, and that's so true. And before we go into practicing vulnerability, which is oh so hard, gosh, how dare you come on here as our first guest and talk about being vulnerable. But there's some other comments here. Just want to make sure that I'm getting into to talk with you guys. Where did they go? Where'd you guys go? I don't know, Leah and you guys, if you're still there, come back and give me your questions again, because I can't see them. But okay, so let's dive into what we do to change this language, and not necessarily even change it, because we just want to make sure that we're defining the terms correctly. And how do we make self-love something that's actually tactile and real in our lives? So you talk about replacing the language of self-love with something like, how do I treat myself with dignity? And what does that look like?
Right. So if I were to say, if you came to me, Kirsten, with, you were feeling some self-hatred, and if I said to yourself, well, what would it mean to love yourself today? Let me first ask that question. And then what if I said, how could you treat yourself with dignity today? Which one of those seems more accessible to you?
Oh, definitely the challenge to say, how would you treat
Yeah.
yourself. Because then that forces me too to say, to actually think about it, not just walk out of the office and be like, I'm going to do this. And then you get in the
Yeah.
car, go home, and you're like, wait, okay, how do I actually do this?
Yeah. So
And then
I think
maybe you back up into another car thinking about it. And then you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot. And then
right.
you're back.
I just love myself. I think dignity is a much more practical word.
Hmm.
I think it's a word that even people who struggle with self-hatred can begin to grasp. I think most people can wrestle with the idea and accept the idea that people across all people have dignity, right? And should be treated with respect. And you're one of them. So let's work on treating yourself with dignity. Um, that seems more attainable and practical than I want you to love yourself.
Hmm.
And so if I think of, well, what can I do to treat myself with dignity today? I start thinking about, well, I could probably go to bed a little earlier tonight. I could stop, beating myself up when I make a mistake. I can set better boundaries. You know, I can treat my body in ways that are healthy. All those types of things come to mind when I think about dignity. Other words that clinicians might use is self-compassion.
Yeah, I
Those
love
types
that
of
one.
things. So I think, again, some languages have 4 or 5 different words for the word love. That English, we only have one. And so I think to find some other words is really helpful and practical. And so I like the word, how do you treat yourself with dignity today?
That's so
Um,
good. Yeah, I want to answer a question here. Kathy and Leo were great to follow up with their questions. Leah says, "How can you fully recover without self-love?" And I just want to say too, before you dive into that, Travis, that yeah, that's a really really great question, and I think it comes back to the definition of, okay, well, what does it mean by self-love? And I think that a lot of us hear that word and then think compassion. And I think it's probably just better, even to, when we hear from the culture the word self-love, to maybe hear acceptance.
yeah,
Um, because like, how do I accept where I am as a person today, right
right.
now? Whether it's
Yeah,
my body, whether, it's how I'm feeling that day, whether it's where I am in my life goals, where I am in some relationships, some of which may be great, some which may be broken. Because we can experience a lot of pain in life that either caused by our own mistakes or caused by external situations. And it can be hard to like love your life in that moment, but you can also accept where
right.
you are in that moment
Yeah,
and give yourself grace and compassion rather than have to love, meaning affirming every single thing that you are. Because
right.
also I feel like, and just answer this question with me and Leah for a second too, that self-love, like the challenge to love yourself, feels to me like I always have to be affirming that everything I'm doing is right. And you can be fully eating disordered, recovered, accepted, like proud, like thankful and grateful and all that kind of stuff, and still do stuff wrong
Yeah,
where you need to be like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that or said that, and then accept that you made a mistake and move on and not feel shame.
yeah. I think so. I think there's another, it sort of demonstrates another struggle I have with the word self-love is that it, in American culture at least, it implies an emotional feeling that I'm going to feel really warm and affectionate towards myself. And I don't think that's a pretty normal human experience to feel that all the time. And to say that you need to feel warm and affectionate to yourself in order to recover, I think sets up an impossible standard. Rather, I think we're going to say, even on days when I don't feel warm and affectionate toward myself, I'm going to treat myself with dignity. And I'm
Yeah,
going to do things that are helpful towards my recovery.
yeah.
And so,
Can you give the practical example of that about
yeah,
with eating disorder behavior? Because in your notes, you give a really great practical, tactile example of how to speak to yourself in that way.
right. So self-hatred, if let's say someone who struggles with bulimia, they binge and they purge, right? And then, which interestingly enough, creates more shame and self-hatred, right? So they might afterwards say, I'm so stupid for binging. What is wrong with me? I'll never get this right, you know, and cuss at themselves and all that. And that is an attempt to deal with the shame of the behavior that just took place, right? So I do a behavior, I feel shame about it, and then I result with more self-hatred, which then creates more vulnerability to do the behavior again, right?
Yeah.
So instead, so I think to treat yourself with dignity would be to speak the truth about yourself in that moment, okay?
Yeah.
Apart from you may not feel warm and affectionate towards yourself at that moment because you just did a behavior that you don't like, right? But to speak the truth about yourself would be to say, I just binged and purged, and that's not helpful to my recovery. I'd like to move forward and treat myself with more dignity.
So
Right? So
good.
you're owning the behavior, right?
Yeah.
Your emotions may not be there, but you can own the behavior and talk about what you want to do moving forward. And I think I can get to that place better by saying, I'm going to treat myself with dignity and make the next right choices that are helpful to me because I have dignity. I can get there easier with the language of dignity and like self-compassion than I can with like love yourself in that moment. I think love yourself again is too vague in that moment.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And those are the moments. And yeah, absolutely. And those are the moments when we need the details of that, right?
We got to learn to speak the truth.
Yeah. And because it's so easy to sit and talk about abstract things, but sometimes you actually need the verbiage. Like can be a very left brain person. And in therapy, I need someone to tell me like, okay, what exactly do I say to myself in moment X, Y, or Z?
Yeah.
And that's such a practical skill. I want to go to something Kathy said, and it makes me wonder too, about healing in community. And we talked about at the beginning that love is a relational word, and how do we heal in community? The truth is that so many of us come from broken relationships or have had trauma, and someone that we've trusted in our lives has betrayed us or hurt us in some way. Or there may be just relationships that are not there anymore. So how do we heal in the context of relationships if there is so much brokenness there, or people don't have safe people? How do we identify safe people? Or as Kathy said, dealing with people who've hurt us so badly. How do you find safe people to do that hard work? Because it is so hard. Being vulnerable with people is ridiculously hard for anyone. And then add on top of the fact that the trying to process through an eating disorder, and how do you find safe people?
Yeah, so those are great questions. I think, so the words that are coming to mind for me are carefully, slowly, persistently, and realistically. And so what I mean by realistically, I'll expand on that. So yeah, shame is a relational issue. Self-hatred is in large part a relational issue because it's related to shame. And so healing of that, whenever I led groups, I was always trying to lead people into an appropriate vulnerability so they could experience the acceptance of the group. That, oh, we get that. We've done that too. I've felt that. We don't judge you, because it's such a powerful healing thing. But realistically, safe community does not mean perfect community. So when we recognize that I'm going to look for a safe community, that doesn't mean those people will never disappoint me or hurt me. I'm just trying to avoid abusive people, untrustworthy people, unsafe people, right? There's a difference between an unsafe person and an imperfect person.
Oh, wait, can you just say that again?
Yeah, there's a difference between an unsafe person and an imperfect person, right? So there are people in my life that I don't feel safe with being vulnerable with them because I don't trust that they would treat me with dignity, right? Or they might go share it outside the group, or they might use the information against me. I also have people in my life who have hurt me, but they're also safe, right? And I'm going to pursue relationships with those people slowly. And the way I do that is I may share a little bit of vulnerability and see how they respond. Are they vulnerable back with me? Or do they get defensive and back off and scared, and reject all that? You can tell pretty quickly at least to some degree, how they are. It's an art, not a science. It's a learned thing, but so you have to be slow about it. You have to be intentional about it. You have to be persistent. You may not be able to find someone local. You may have to find an online support group.
Mm,
You may have to find a group where you have to travel 45 minutes. You
yeah.
know, you may have to call an old friend who you've been out of touch with, but is safe.
Yeah.
So I've got to have people like that in my life. I have a friend right now that I can call him any time of the week and say, "Hey, Jeff, I'm a mess." Like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and he's safe, right? But I have friends who I used to have those relationships with that we don't anymore, whether that's because circumstances changed or whatever. So it's an art. You have to work at it.
Yeah. And if I can just share, I mean, a really great example of that and just an addendum that I think it's so important to remember too with safe people and finding safe people, that sometimes the act of sharing and being vulnerable itself is healing rather than just sharing and then demanding, expecting, and relying upon the response that you want to that vulnerability. Because yesterday I was sharing something with a friend, like I was having just a very reflective day. And for me, when I'm super reflective and, I'm a person of faith, so I'm prayerful, I listen to my music, I talk to God. I was out in nature. I was like listening to beautiful music, and I'm just like, tears come very easily for me. And I don't even have to be sad. I could just be like, it's so beautiful and the music's so beautiful. And I just get all like, wound up. But I was having a super reflective day. And so I was just having this really good cry, and it was awesome. And I talked to a friend about it, and I think in that moment I wanted someone to be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah," and like totally there with me, and they weren't. They were much more subdued and reserved and just listening, and then they weren't saying anything for a while. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, what are they thinking? They must think I'm crazy. They must think I'm a mess. Do I need to apologize? Do I need to try to reverse that and be like, oh, but everything's really fine?" And then their response eventually was, "Oh, I'm so impressed by that." And I was like, wow, cool. Yeah, I mean, because I was vulnerable and like I didn't get the response that I wanted, but still I felt so good after that.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself was healing. And I don't know the depth of the effect that it had on the other person, but it was healing that happened in the context of community. And I didn't necessarily get the response that I wanted, but the act of sharing in and of itself was very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I I think I'd love to see the language shifting a little bit from self-love more towards community and relationship and safety.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be more healing to self-hatred. It requires immense trust, because if I say to you, if Kirsten, you come to me with, a lot of self-hatred, and I go, wow, I'm sorry for all that, but I'm so glad you told me that. You have to believe me that I'm glad that you told
Yeah,
me, right? There's a trust there involved.
absolutely.
But we know our brains are relational. We know that our brains work relationally. We know that humans don't do well in isolation. So I'd love to see more movement towards community as we talk about these very, troubling experiences that we have.
Yeah. Travis, one more thing before we have to wrap this up. Pamela has a great question. She said, can we talk about being judged by others when you've recovered and way more than you should, which is interesting, because is that should based on BMI scales, or should based on what the culture says or how you feel? There's a whole bunch of questions there. But she says, I'm fluffy now, which is awesome. If that's healthy and good for you. And can't share about my ed past because I'm saying to myself that they don't believe me. So how would we help, or like give some practical examples, or Pamela, how to treat herself with dignity, even if the people around her aren't safe?
Yeah, that's great. I think some of it is to talk through. So I heard her say several comments that are sort of self-evaluations, right? Like, I can't talk about this with her. It's her perceptions of things. I can't talk about this with others. Others would judge me. Others wouldn't believe me. So number one, I guess I would encourage her to check those out. is that really true, or is that her perception of things? Now, it may be that's true. People might go, no way did you ever have an eating disorder. Like they might say that, but I would encourage her first to check, is that perception or is this, sort of fact? Because the response would be different, right? If people are really responding and saying, there's no way you ever had an eating disorder, you're not skinny enough, then I would say unsafe people. Like,
Yeah, great point.
safe people, right? So find some people, move towards people who are willing to hear your story and willing to move past their fear or their own perceptions or judgment of what an eating disorder person would look like.
Mhm.
Can you read the question again too? Because there was another part.
Yeah. She said, oh, it went away now. I just want to,
Okay.
um,
How do we deal with the comments of others who judge us for weighing more than we?
yeah, and that she feels like she can't trust those people,
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, I guess I
Yeah,
may have
you
missed part
pretty
of
much
what she.
answered it. And Pamela said, unsafe people. Excellent, in all caps.
Yeah,
So,
I think probably.
um,
I mean, I don't
yeah.
know that for sure, but just from the little, from what
Yeah,
we're able to grab in a few sentences, it sounds like, wow, they may not be safe people.
yeah, totally. And I love
Or
this.
if they are safe, go back to them and say, this is, wow, I was hurt by your comment. It
Yeah, an educational moment.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it
that's
may be
right.
a safe person that just spoke out of turn. She doesn't
Right.
have to evaluate that.
Yeah, and Kathy says, I took my scale outside and smashed it with a sledgehammer. That felt amazing.
Nicole Dempsey would be so proud of her.
I know, right? I love it. So awesome. Okay, well, we just want to say thank you so much to everyone. Your comments have been amazing. Thank you for sharing your perspective on this, on a topic that's got a lot of feelings and emotions wrapped around with it. So I want to thank you for having this be a safe place with us to be able to hear that and talk about this, and allowing Travis and I to be vulnerable with all of you too. So thank you for that. And Travis, I'll let you get one final word in here, but just want to wrap up kind of what we talked about self-love, and is that the most helpful word for expressing the kind of compassion, grace, and dignity with which we need to practice treating ourselves so that our recovery can be long lasting and truly healing, rather than just an abstract thought that kind of gets lost in the myriad thoughts which enter our heads throughout the day. And I hope that we got a clearer sense of that and how to treat ourselves with dignity, even on days where radical self-love, what does that even mean, is possible. So Travis, I'll let you wrap it up for our
Yeah.
guests.
Well, I was just thinking back whenever I do a presentation or something, I try to identify like what's the main thought that I want people to walk away with. And so when I was doing it for this, I wrote down that I'll read this. I want to encourage people to move towards vulnerable community and clear language rather than isolation and cliches. So vulnerable community and clear language rather than isolation and cliches. Because I think we're going to find more healing when we do those things.
So good.
It's fun to be with you. And next time you're on this side of the pond, you let us know, and it'd be fun to get to see you and have you come by McAllen Place and visit with our people. So.
Absolutely. I love McCallum, and say hello to Dr. Kim as well. She's amazing and a dear friend of so many people in the eating disorder field. Before you go, can you say your line one more time?
Yeah. I want to encourage people to move towards vulnerable community and clear language rather than isolation and cliches.
So good. Travis, you rock.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank all of you for tuning in so much to this week, our very second episode of Weekly Hope. We're going to be back next week on Wednesday. And actually, shoot us a time. Let us know if you're watching this video, if you'd be more likely to watch in the afternoon, like midday around lunchtime, or possibly in the afternoon after work. We want to try to find a time when, that's convenient for all of you. So let us know what would work for next week. Next week, we're going to welcome Dr. Margaret Nagib from Timberline Knoll. She's going to be on here discussing desire.
Ooh, say hi to Margaret.
Yeah, I will for sure. She said she loves you too. But we're going to be talking about desire and what our true desires are, figuring out what those are and how to be true to them. So thank you guys so much for watching. Have a beautiful, wonderful night. And it was an honor to be with you. Let's go out there and continue to use clear language and heal in the context of community. All right, signing off. Wait, we got to have Elsa say bye. Hold on. Elsa says bye, and thank you for tuning in. Sorry, I love my dog. All right, bye everyone. Thanks for watching this week's edition of Weekly Hope, and we will see you next week. Ciao.